Well, good morning. This morning, I just want to talk about awe. That's the book that I waited almost 2 years to read. And, well, it's good. It's interesting. But like many of these books, sadly, I think I've told you this before when I was first learning about this stuff 20, 30 years ago. We thought that a short book was just like a little novella or a pamphlet, right? Under 200 pages or worthless. I'm being bombastic, but so many books today I see, and even wonderful books like Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, and then even worse, his follow-up, Nudge, um, Basil van der Kolk's. He as well, his book, The Body, is it The Body Keeps the Score? Is that one his? It's about trauma. And it's a massive book, and it doesn't need to be because he repeats himself over and over again. Right, I mean, a great example is the book I'm reading right now. It's what is her name? Helen Langer, I think is her name. She's been writing about mindfulness for ages, and it's her new book, The Mindful Body. And just like many I've read in the last couple weeks, I really don't care about some of your really silly stories like Langer. She spent an entire 40 minutes talking about how she wanted Helen Hunt to play her in the movie about her life. It's like, really? Like, are you not being mindful? This is not relatable, and it's actually pathetic. You talking about how starstruck you were when you were humbly bragging about them making a movie about your life. I mean, it's hilarious because her idea of mindfulness is not mindfulness. It's not. What she calls mindfulness is simply being present, being conscious. What Carl Jung attributed to most evil in this world, the fact that we walk around and act completely unconscious. Being mindful is a step beyond focus, awareness. I mean, it is very similar, but it's more than just being present. I mean, that's what the book McMindfulness is about. Arguably, that's what the book McMindfulness was written about, was this idea that obviously was probably spearheaded by Miss Langer, that mindfulness is something that a soldier mowing down a crowd of people could utilize to stay focused on the horrors that they're inflicting. Right? That's not mindfulness. Right? But like I said, this Dacher Keltner, the book called Awe, it's excellent. But honestly, I'm going to go and read the paper he did in 2003 with Jonathan Haidt. And I can pretty much guarantee that most of what you want would probably be in the paper, right? Because forget Blinkist, right? I saw Blinkist. They did, what is it? They do like a 5-minute intro into what this stuff is, a book or, what have you. And I noticed it's about 2.5 megabytes. I don't understand what they need 2.5 megabytes to explain the book Awe, because it doesn't take that much, because it really is as simple as what we're talking about. I'm going to read to you what essentially this book takes away. I'm going to take some of the stuff that he explained in his book Awe, and I'm going to take some of the information that they used to explain Awe in their original paper back in 2003. But I think what you're going to see, not to spoil it for you, spoilers, I think you're going to see that Nietzsche once again was right. We are the Schatzingen. Pardon my pronunciation, but it's just Schatzen, and we are the evaluator, right? Schatzen, what we treasure, what we value, what we find meaning, purpose, is what we create. What we create is what we value. It's this circle of perspectival value, and we're the arbiter of value. So we decide, and I'm going to read you what Dacher, Keltner, and Jonathan Haidt both agree to be desperately important to our human experience. Awe. And it's what I attribute. I don't know if I'd say awe. I mean, awe, wonder, relevance. Perspective really is a great way to put it, right? But it's what I think it was Nishitani out of the Kyoto University. I believe it was Nishitani, right? He studied Heidegger and Nietzsche, and he was a Zen Buddhist. And he talked about the importance of this idea of basho. And Jung wrote about it, but it's not as rich. Again, you'll see my level of language and philology here. Because the Japanese characters for place, basho, now being used to just mean like a tournament, like sumo, lumo. That's the honorable sumo. But in reality, it's two characters that go all the way back to China. One of the characters represents a warrior prepared and dressed for battle. The character actually shows this. So he's ready for action. He's present. He's aware. He's mindfully prepared for his action. The vita activa plus the vita contemplativa blended. And the second character in I guess you'd say the word basho in Japanese, the second character represents the place of battle, right? This is where the use in sumo comes from, because the ring, right? Basho, the place, which is exactly what sumo is, right? It's warriors at the place of battle, prepared and ready to meet the challengers. And the ring itself is the place of battle, right? So here, let me give you what I'm talking about here, because this, once again, shows perspectivalness of our meaning and our value and awe. But more importantly, it shows that we're the arbiter of awe, right? Yes, sometimes, in fact, possibly most of the time, awe comes in, what would you call it, arbitrarily, right? It sneaks itself in, or many of us are told. I mean, I've explained this before. One of the forms of awe is the visual, and I've explained this, that the Hindus, the Indian subcontinent, talked about how many of their temples were built with all sorts of intricate designs and sculptures. They were meant to be beautiful because they believed that even the visual, right, even by looking at something beautiful, we could achieve a form of enlightenment. Right? So fast forward, thousands of years, and science is just finally starting to agree. And I laugh because I've been saying this for 5 years, that cognitive science has just begun to understand what is consciousness, what is self. And yet the Yogacarans have been studying this for about 1,100 years. Right? But let me read you about what is awe and the types of awe. And I think you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about, the fact that awe is not something external. In fact, you could place two people side by side in the same experience, and we all know that they're not both going to experience the same awe. And in fact, arguably, that's one of the forms of awe, is actually being in a group. So we sometimes misunderstand that. The idea of recently we saw this with the eclipse. I was actually living in an area where we had a total eclipse of the sun. And so I was able to witness the awe. I've experienced it a couple of times in my life. Plus, because I guess I argue, and please don't misunderstand, I am being bombastic, but I see myself as broken when it comes to these sorts of awe experiences because of, my life, the way I've been raised, and all of the experiences I've gone through. Plus, I have 3 chronic illnesses that play off against each other. Like yesterday, I had a cup of tea, and I spent the entire day in a panic attack, right? Not just an hour, not just 10 minutes, but 10 or 12 hours of a panic attack, right? Sitting in the air conditioning, sweating bullets, but the previous day out in 40-degree humid weather and barely breaking a sweat. It's funny how it is all perspectival, right? In my case, everything was a problem because I was suffering from, well, in my case, it could be something to do with my allergies, but most importantly, it has to do with histamine and inflammation. I talked about this. Inflammation is at the heart of just about everything when it comes to our disease and malaise. But it was never so obvious to me until yesterday. I really thought everything I'd been working on, I mean, I can't believe I'm at this point. But then it struck me like it's simple, right? I've explained this before that, right, people walk around completely dehydrated for months, years. And then when you finally get them to hydrate properly for a period of time, as people tend to do, they will slip. And almost everybody to a person complains at how horrible they feel when they begin to get dehydrated. And then when you remind them that, that used to be your default. You used to walk around like that 24/7. Like when I worked at the bank, everyone drank 12 to 20 cups of coffee a day. There is zero chance that we were properly hydrating because this was long before people were walking around with these giant Stanley mugs, right? And I wonder if people are actually drinking the whole thing. I can't imagine they'd be able to, right? But what made me realize the perspectivalness, right? Meaning you choose the value of awe, of wonder, was like I said, there were the church doctors in the desert, and there's the rich tradition of monasticism in Tibet, right? There's never been a society with so many people devoted to a spiritual tradition. And that environment really puts the zap on your head, as I might say. And I argue we can do the same thing here in Canada, particularly out west. There's this mountain range that's known as the Headless Range. There is some old stories being told, but I think that's what makes all of this special, right? But here, let me read you the different types of awe so you can get an idea, right? Okay, so where are we here? So there's 8 types of awe. This is from, so the moral beauty of others, collective movement, nature, visual design, music, spirituality. I mean, that one's a tough one because, right? Big ideas, and encountering the beginning and end of life. Right? So the moral beauty of others, it's all subjective, right? Do you believe somebody's morality is beautiful? That's up to you. I mean, arguably, it's like Jung said, in reverse, right? So the beauty you see in others is the beauty you want to see in yourself. Collective movement, I just talked about that. We are the most gregarious of animals, as Nietzsche said. So nothing feeds into our soul like tribalism. But don't misunderstand. I argue tribalism is just like the self. It is our greatest tool and asset, but at the same time, it can be our greatest hindrance to community, to collective good, to individuality. It's the balance that we have such a hard time with. Madhyamaka in Sanskrit, a middle way. You need to find a balance, right? Nature, that's a given. That's I talked about. That's what they call biophilia. There's something about being in the environment that's just wonderful for us. But again, if you look at the science, just listening to running water or birds or waves can be quite soothing and healing. Right? I talked about this recently that supposedly living around water is incredibly healing to a number of people. I live surrounded by water, but unlike where I grew up, I don't hear the water. Right? I'm surrounded by, well, probably some of the largest bodies of water in the world, but they don't influence me. But they can if I put on a little USB water fountain. I'll get almost the identical benefit from that water trickling over plastic rocks as I would sitting on the seashore. The only difference is perspectival. Right? If I find the value greater, because as I said, if you're on the beach, it's not just nature, it's the sound of nature. So there's your music, it's the visual design, right? It's big ideas, it's spirituality, right? Beginning and end of life. It's not just you. Think about it. What do they call that? Causality, impermanence of everything, right? Everything is either coming into being or diffusing. I'm trying to think of another word, right, for ending. But as you see, just about everything that's listed here as a source of awe, and you can stack them, but you'll see that they're all perspectival, right? If you go down to the beach and the only thing you pay attention to is the squawking seagulls and the smell of the surf, right, because it tends to be a little fishy, then you're not going to achieve that sense of awe. Or I've seen this with when I used to give tours in a Buddhist museum and temple complex, right? Some of the artwork is, inherently beautiful, but that is beauty is in the eye of the beholder. If someone looks at it and sees it as some sort of obscure, what would you call it? I can't remember what they call that. The idea of there's a term for it where you find it, oh, look at that, different stuff from the other side of the fence, right? So if you see it as a weird, strange culture and their weird art, then you're not going to see it as wonder, right? The reason why I mention that is, let's see here, the next one here is the 7 ways to be awe-inspired in everyday life. 1, take awe excursions in nature. Taking awe excursions in nature is one way to regularly experience awe. Is it though? So what is an awe excursion in nature? What they really mean is go for a walk in nature and not be distracted by phone calls or bills or even like me with audiobooks, and actually experience nature and the beauty and the wonder of nature. And I've explained how I do that on every one of my walks, right? If I see a worm struggling on the pavement, I'll help him to whatever grass that he looked like he was trying to get to, right? The beauty of the birds, of nature, the trees. Even the sunlight. Absolutely, you've seen how many photographs I take of sunrises and sunsets. It seems odd, doesn't it? But the awe excursions in nature, once again, are your choice, your perspective, your emotional regulation state, your the state of your what do they call it? There's a part of the brain that they attribute to the self, and off the top of my head, I can't remember because they usually just use the letters. But off the top of my head, I can't remember. But it slows this area of the brain that we consider to be the area known for self. And the most important aspect in awe is this equanimity I've been talking about for 5 years. Right. So once again, it's almost a told us so. I've been talking about the I and thou and Martin Buber. I've been talking about how equanimity is not properly translated into English. Equanimité. What is that in Sanskrit and Pali? I can't remember. See, this is what happens. As Nietzsche said, don't be upset by that. Sometimes you need to forget, right? Because none of that really matters. The idea is all that matters. It doesn't matter that I remember what the actual word is. You can find it yourself. Just look up equanimity in Sanskrit or Pali. And I only mention it because, again, once again, in almost every other language besides English, these concepts are understood. Just like faith, it means trust, it means devotion and commitment, just like awe, right? The only way spirituality works, the only way religion works, the only way your path has value and meaning, and the only way awe and wonder will appear is if you see the value in it, right? As a final, what would you call it? Nail in the coffin. This is from Keltner and Haidt's 2003 paper on the science of awe. And they propose the flavors of awe are threat, beauty, ability, virtue, and supernatural causality. Each and every one of these is perspectival. You are the evaluator of threat, right? We talked about this. William James, he used the threat of a bear, right? The threat is not what brings about these profound experiences. It's our perception of beauty. Same thing, right? Beauty in the eye of the beholder, but one step further, beauty is in the eye of the mood of the beholder, right? Because one day you may love something, the next day, 1 minute, and the next minute not. Ability, well, what is ability? As I said, it's a double-edged sword here, right? Do you appreciate somebody else's ability, or do you even have the skill to judge their ability? We've talked about this. If it takes 20,000 hours to become proficient at or with something, the truth is it takes nearly as long to judge someone's proficiency, right? So you almost have to become skilled at, say, playing the guitar to know whether someone is skilled at playing the guitar. It's a funny little thing, but it's the same as awe. The way to experience awe is to experience awe, right? Because virtue, that's another of the 5 types of awe. It's like that moral value. That's beyond good and evil, Nietzsche. What is virtue, right? I could give you a number of examples, and a lot of them are very perspectival as well as what's the word I'm looking for? It's not popular to be talking about some of these different things, but I can give you a dozen different positions that people take binary positions on. Yes, no, when in reality, true virtue would be somewhere in between, right? Where you find a middle way, because there is no black and white. In fact, they've even proven this recently. They found, in biology, they were actually able to replicate the yin and yang symbol using like cells. It's just, you got to look into it. It's beyond me what's going on there, but it's really quite interesting. And the final of the 5 types of awe, according to Haidt and Keltner, is supernatural causality. And I find that hilarious because supernatural causality is what Carl Jung would have called the reasons we attributed to things like thunder and the wind. Our archaic selves needed these supernatural causality. Right, sure. We can go to Whitman or Emerson, right, when they talked about the majesty of what makes flowers grow, or Brother Lawrence. Who else said it? There was an old philosopher who said it as well. This idea that looking at a tree before it had begun to bloom again, right? Looking at a tree, say in winter or in fall, it doesn't look like it's alive. But we know that life will return again, right? It's very perspectival. Right? So I guess, like I said, the toughest part here is this know thyself. The only person that can do it for you is not that different from this idea of awe, of wonder, spirituality, philosophy, religion, meaning, value. As I said in yesterday's podcast, meaning is not missing. It's not stolen. It's not rare. it's hidden. Because the only person that can uncover meaning, awe, wonder, is us.